Well, police arrested Grammy Award-winning rapper Lil Durk in Florida on federal charges that he paid for the attempted 2022 revenge killing of another rapper at a Los Angeles gas station. Investigators are saying the shooting was aimed at Quando Rondo. Rondo's cousin was killed instead.
Lil Durk fainted in court after finding out it is over for him. Days before his trial is set to begin, rulings came down that the defense could not stop, and the evidence they fought hardest to keep out is now heading straight toward the jury. The trial date is locked in. The evidence is coming in. And when you find out exactly what went against Durk in those final pretrial hearings, you will understand why some people are saying he may never walk free again. Stay with us, because this one is deeper than you think. Yo, what's good, fam? Today we are breaking down the full story of Lil Durk's federal murder for hire trial, the pretrial rulings that just went against him, what the government is bringing into that courtroom, and what is actually at stake when jury selection starts on August 20th. Let's get into it. Now, before we get into the latest rulings, let me keep it real with you about who we are talking about. Durk Banks, known to the world as Lil Durk, is one of the most successful Chicago rappers of his generation. He built Only the Family, the OTF collective, from the ground up on the South Side. He started releasing music in the early 2010s, when streaming was still finding its footing, and he grinded through mixtapes, features, and street credibility to build an audience that eventually crossed over into mainstream dominance. He turned raw street narratives into mainstream hits, earned Grammy recognition alongside India Shawn for Voice of the Heroes with Lil Baby, collaborated with Drake, Future, and dozens of the biggest names in the genre, and became one of the defining voices of an entire generation of hip-hop. His sound, his cadence, his subject matter, and his relationships shaped a lane that dozens of artists followed. He is not a fringe figure in the culture. He is a central one. That is what makes this federal case one of the most significant legal stories in modern hip-hop history. When someone of his level gets arrested on federal murder for hire charges, the whole industry takes notice. And this case has not stopped generating headlines since the October 2024 arrest. At the center of the government's theory is a relationship and a tragedy. King Von, born Davon Bennett, was one of Durk's closest artists, a rising Chicago rapper with a distinctive storytelling style who was building serious momentum with hits like Crazy Story and Took Her to the O, when everything changed on November 6, 2020. Outside a hookah lounge in Atlanta in the early hours of the morning, a confrontation broke out between Von's group and the crew of Savannah rapper Quando Rondo, born Tyquin Bowman. The argument turned violent, reportedly escalating from a physical fight into an exchange of gunfire. King Von was shot multiple times and died that morning. He was 26 years old. Timothy Leaks, a Quando Rondo associate, was charged with murder in connection with Von's death, but those felony charges were later dropped. For Durk and for OTF, the loss was enormous. King Von was not just a business relationship. He was family, a member of the collective Durk had built, and someone whose career Durk had personally invested in. The grief that followed his death was real, public, and documented. And according to the government, that grief eventually transformed into something prosecutors described as a criminal conspiracy that reached across state lines and resulted in another man's death. Here is where it gets real. Prosecutors alleged that in the nearly 2 years after King Von's death, Durk made it known that he would pay a bounty to anyone who killed Quando Rondo, whom prosecutors say Durk held responsible for Bennett's death. According to court filings, the government alleges that bounty reached as high as $1 million. Prosecutors also allege that communications showed Durk using coded language with text to his crew suggesting that anyone who made it straight with the target would be rewarded. Language prosecutors intend to frame for the jury as direct code for hitman payouts. According to the FBI affidavit from Agent Sarah Corcoran, the alleged plot moved quickly once Durk's associates learned that Quando Rondo was in Los Angeles in August 2022. On August 18, 2022, they reportedly pinpointed Rondo's location. The next day, August 19, 2022, a group allegedly connected to OTF tracked Rondo to a gas station in the Beverly Grove neighborhood of Los Angeles near the Beverly Center. At least 18 rounds were allegedly fired at the target's vehicle. Quando Rondo survived, but his 24-year-old cousin Xavier Robinson, known as Lou Pab, was shot and killed. Prosecutors allege Durk financed and directed the operation. Durk has pleaded not guilty to all charges. The indictment contains allegations that must be proven in court, and the government has emphasized that defendants are presumed innocent. The federal investigation that followed produced an indictment charging Durk alongside co-defendants Kayvon London Grant, DeAndre Dontrell Wilson, Keith Jones, David Bryan Lindsay, and Asa Houston. The core charges include conspiracy to commit murder for hire resulting in a death, and use and discharge of a machine gun in a violent crime resulting in death. A proposed jury instruction sheet filed in August 2026 also listed conspiracy to commit stalking and stalking resulting in death among the charged offenses. According to prosecutors, OTF-connected credit cards were used to purchase plane tickets to fly the alleged participants from Chicago to California. Prosecutors further alleged that someone connected to OTF offered lucrative music opportunities to anyone who would carry out the killing. These are prosecution allegations, not findings of fact, but they form the framework the government will build its case on. Now let's talk about what just happened in court. The defense has been fighting on two major fronts heading into this trial, and both battles produced rulings that went the prosecution's way. The first front was the phone evidence. Here is the background on that phone fight. A cell phone connected to Durk was seized during a 2021 home burglary investigation in Georgia. The defense argued the seizure and subsequent search of the device were constitutionally problematic, particularly because the FBI did not obtain its own federal warrant on the phone until July 8, 2026, nearly 2 years into the federal prosecution and only 6 weeks before trial. Durk's legal team argued that the delay left them without adequate time to investigate, challenge, or prepare a rebuttal to whatever the phone contained. They pushed hard to suppress everything obtained from the device, including a text message prosecutors reportedly intend to offer as a significant trial exhibit. On August 13th, Judge Michael W. Fitzgerald heard arguments and denied the defense's suppression motions, ruling that the government's later federal warrants and the circumstances of the search met the legal standard. The specified material obtained from the phone will be permitted as evidence subject to the normal rules of admissibility at trial. Let that sink in for a minute. Digital evidence in a federal case can be devastating precisely because of its specificity. Timestamps, metadata, messages, photographs, contacts, locations. If prosecutors can authenticate what they obtained and connect it to their theory of the case, the phone could become one of the most important exhibits in the trial. The defense will have the opportunity to challenge how the evidence is interpreted, but they could not get it thrown out entirely. That is a significant blow. But here is where it gets even more real. The second pretrial battle was about music, specifically about Durk's 2021 track Piss Me Off. Prosecutors filed a motion arguing that the song and its accompanying music video should be admitted as evidence because they demonstrate Durk's mindset, his anger over King Von's death, and his alleged resolve to retaliate against those he held responsible. Rolling Stone reported that in their motion, prosecutors described the song as showing Durk's, quote, resolve to avenge the death of his friend and protege King Von Bennett. The government argued the song is essentially a call to arms, with lyrics referencing associates prepare for violence, funding weapons, and bonds, and imagery showing Durk handling large sums of cash. Prosecutors also told the judge that a cooperating witness connected to the Los Angeles shooting was actually present when the video was filmed and would testify about his interpretation of the lyrics and what was happening around that production. The defense pushed back hard. Durk's attorney argued that Piss Me Off was an emotional response to grief, including the death of his brother Dante, and that it was artistic expression, not a criminal statement. She also connected her objection to an earlier ruling where Judge Fitzgerald had severed newly filed racketeering charges from the August trial, arguing that admitting the song could indirectly reintroduce themes tied to charges the judge had already separated. That argument did not carry the day. On August 13th, Judge Fitzgerald ruled that the Piss Me Off music video and related material can be used at trial. The government got another significant pretrial win. Real talk, that ruling opens a debate that goes well beyond this single case. Rap lyrics have been used as evidence in criminal trials across the country for years, and the practice has generated serious controversy. The argument for admission is that lyrics and videos can provide relevant context about a defendant's state of mind, relationships, and intentions. The argument against is that rap music is a genre built on fictionalization, persona, metaphor, exaggerated street imagery and narrative storytelling that does not always reflect the artist's real life. Rappers routinely describe scenarios they did not personally experience, embody characters who are not themselves, and use hyperbole as an artistic device. Interpreting that material literally in front of a jury who may not understand the genre's conventions can unfairly prejudice the outcome. The judge allowed the evidence, but the defense can still argue to the jury that the song is art, not a confession. What weight the jurors give it is their decision alone. Now let's talk about the broader case the government has assembled. Recent reporting indicates prosecutors have identified approximately 35 witnesses, with around 20 of those considered key witnesses. A cooperating witness connected to the Los Angeles shooting is among the most significant, as that person is expected to offer direct testimony about the alleged conspiracy, interpret the Piss Me Off video for the jury, and potentially describe conversations and events surrounding the attack. The exact testimony and credibility of all witnesses will only become clear during trial. Former associates who cooperate with the government can provide powerful first-hand accounts, but they also face aggressive cross-examination, and their credibility can be challenged on the basis of incentives, inconsistent prior statements, or cooperation deals made with prosecutors. The prosecution's evidence reportedly includes digital material described as running into hundreds of gigabytes, along with over 30,000 pages of investigative reports. That is not a number designed to impress you. That is a number that tells you how long federal agents spent building this case and how many documents, communications, records, and reports they assembled into a single prosecution file. The government's case is built on allegedly connecting multiple categories of evidence into a single coherent narrative. Financial records allegedly showing OTF-linked credit cards used to purchase the flights and hotel stays for the alleged participants traveling from Chicago to California. Flight manifests and credit card tracking that prosecutors say prove Durk financed the travel logistics of the alleged operation. Phone and digital communications that prosecutors say establish relationships and intent. The cooperating witness testimony from someone who claims to have direct knowledge of the conspiracy, and now the Piss Me Off music video, which prosecutors say a cooperating witness will personally interpret for the jury based on having been present during its filming. That is a layered evidentiary strategy built on the idea that multiple independent categories of evidence, when viewed together, prove the government's theory beyond a reasonable doubt. Prosecutors also allege that following the shooting, people involved in the attack received specific rewards for their alleged participation. According to court filings, those rewards allegedly included custom jewelry, luxury grills, and prominent placements in OTF music videos, benefits that prosecutors say demonstrate the organization's system of compensating people who carried out work on its behalf. Those alleged post-shooting transactions are expected to be part of the trial record. The defense will have the opportunity to challenge the government's interpretation of every one of those transactions. Here is the real kicker though. Not every pretrial ruling went the prosecution's way. In July 2026, in a notable victory for the defense, Judge Fitzgerald granted Durk's request to sever a set of newly added racketeering-related charges that prosecutors had filed in the superseding indictment. Those racketeering allegations involved a separate 2022 killing in Chicago. The judge ruled they would be handled in a completely separate trial rather than being folded into the August murder-for-hire case. That was a meaningful procedural win for the defense. It means the jury sitting in Los Angeles starting August 20th will not be hearing evidence about the Chicago racketeering allegations alongside the murder-for-hire charges. The defense successfully narrowed the battlefield for this trial. Let me break down for you what the government's narrative is likely to look like once the jury is seated. The prosecution is expected to argue that King Von's death in November 2020 created the alleged motive. Communications and digital records will allegedly provide context and establish relationships between the parties. The financial records showing OTF-linked cards purchasing flights allegedly connect the organization to the logistical preparation. The travel to California allegedly shows the conspiracy moving from planning to execution. The August 19th shooting allegedly represents the criminal event, with Lil Pav's death as its result. And Piss Me Off will allegedly show the jury what Durk's state of mind was in the period leading up to the attack. But here is where the defense's opportunity comes in. And do not sleep on this part because the defense has significant tools available. The phone evidence can be challenged on the question of what the material actually shows, whether it connects to the specific charges, and whether the jury can be convinced that context matters as much as content. A text message does not convict someone on its own. Prosecutors have to establish what it means, who sent it, when it was sent, and what the recipient did with it. The defense will have the chance to offer a competing interpretation at every step. The music can be argued as artistic expression that should not be taken literally. Durk's defense attorney has already staked out that position, arguing that Piss Me Off was a grief-driven tribute tied to the loss of family members, not a roadmap to violence. That argument will be made again in front of the jury, and the defense will likely call on the broader history of rap music in court to make the case that taking lyrics at face value misrepresents how the genre actually works. The witnesses can be cross-examined on their credibility, the cooperation deals they made with the government in exchange for reduced charges or favorable treatment, inconsistencies between their earlier statements and their trial testimony, and the possibility that they are shaping their accounts to serve their own interests. Cooperating witnesses are among the most powerful tools prosecutors have, but they are also among the most vulnerable to cross-examination. A skilled defense attorney with inconsistent prior statements can do real damage to the government's narrative. The financial records can potentially be given innocent explanations, and the defense attorney can argue to the jury that the government's chain of evidence has gaps, and that the prosecution cannot prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Durk knowingly participated in the charged conduct, let alone directed it from a position of criminal control. Durk has been detained in federal custody since his October 2024 arrest, after he was stopped at a Florida airport while allegedly attempting to leave the country. He has been held without bail for nearly a year. In May 2025, prosecutors revealed they would not seek the death penalty, which removed the most extreme possible outcome but left the severity of the remaining charges fully intact. The court denied his request for pretrial release in June 2025, with the judge determining that the government had established by clear and convincing evidence that no condition or combination of conditions would reasonably assure his appearance and the safety of the community. That standard is difficult to meet, but the government met it. Durk has been sitting in federal custody while his attorneys have been fighting these pretrial battles. That detention has already changed the shape of his career, his ability to release music, his finances, and his public presence in a way that even the most loyal fan base cannot fully offset. Music from incarcerated artists can circulate, but the ability to build, perform, collaborate, and direct a career does not function the same way from a federal detention facility. The charges he faces carry a statutory maximum of life imprisonment. And here is the part that makes that number even heavier. The federal prison system does not have parole. There is no federal parole board that can release someone after they have served a portion of a sentence. If Durk is convicted on the murder for hire and conspiracy charges and a judge sentences him to life, that means exactly what it says: the rest of his life behind bars. That reality has been hanging over this case since the day he was arrested in October 2024. Now, about that title, let's address what the culture does with the federal pretrial hearing. When news broke about the phone ruling and the Piss Me Off ruling on August 13th, social media erupted with headlines saying it was over, that Durk was cooked, that he fainted in court, that he had already lost. Reaction channels and commentary accounts were treating the pretrial rulings like a final verdict. That is how this culture processes complicated legal news. It compresses a procedural hearing into a single emotional moment and assigns a winner and a loser before a single juror has been sworn in. The audience does not necessarily want the nuance. They want the headline, the clip, the quote that says it all in 10 seconds. That is how viral content works. But a federal criminal trial does not work that way. Let me be direct about what those August 13th rulings actually are and what they are not. They are pretrial evidentiary rulings. They determine what the government is allowed to try to show the jury. They are not findings of guilt. They are not convictions. They are not even a preview of how the jury will receive the evidence once they actually see it in context with cross-examination, defense arguments, and competing interpretations. Judges rule on admissibility. Juries rule on credibility and weight. Those are completely different functions. The rulings on August 13th were significant setbacks for the defense. They gave prosecutors additional tools to construct their narrative, but they do not mean the case is decided. The phone evidence still has to be presented, authenticated, and explained to 12 people who will be evaluating everything they see and hear through the lens of reasonable doubt. The piss me off video still has to be shown in a courtroom, where the defense can argue at length that it is grief-driven art created by a man mourning a friend, not a criminal blueprint. The cooperating witness still has to take the stand, give his testimony, and then survive whatever cross-examination Durk's attorneys are prepared to deliver. And every single element of the government's case still has to survive the legal and evidentiary standard of proof beyond a reasonable doubt. Here is where we stand. King Von was killed on November 6, 2020 outside a hookah lounge in Atlanta. The grief was real, the public mourning was documented, and according to the government, something darker allegedly took shape in the months that followed. Prosecutors alleged that a bounty was placed on Quando Rondo's life, and that the alleged plot became operational in August 2022. On August 18, 2022, Durk's associates allegedly learned that Rondo was in Los Angeles. On August 19, 2022, shots rang out at a gas station in the Beverly Grove neighborhood near the Beverly Center. At least 18 rounds were allegedly fired. Lou Pob, Quando Rondo's 24-year-old cousin, was killed. Quando Rondo survived. 5 OTF-connected defendants were charged, and Durk was eventually arrested in October 2024 at a Florida airport. The federal case has been moving through pretrial litigation ever since, with the trial delayed multiple times before landing on the August 20th, 2026 start date. In July 2026, the judge severed the newly filed racketeering charges, giving the defense a meaningful win that narrowed the scope of the August trial. On August 13, 2026, Judge Fitzgerald ruled the phone evidence stays in and the Piss Me Off music video goes to the jury, handing prosecutors 2 critical pretrial victories. Those rulings shape the battlefield but do not determine the outcome. On August 20th, 2026, jury selection begins in Los Angeles. That is where the story will actually be decided. The next chapter of this story will not be written on social media. It will not be settled by reaction videos, hot take threads, viral clips of courthouse steps, or YouTube thumbnails. The people who decide Durk's fate are not going to be watching commentary online. They are going to be sitting in a federal courtroom in Los Angeles, hearing opening statements from both sides, evaluating witness testimony under oath, weighing the government's exhibits against the defense's challenges, and deliberating behind closed doors until every single one of them reaches the same conclusion. That is the constitutional process. That is the standard Durk is entitled to under the law, regardless of what the headlines say. And that is what is about to happen, starting August 20th inside a Los Angeles federal courthouse, where the only opinions that matter belong to 12 jurors. The government has the burden. They have to prove every element of every charge beyond a reasonable doubt. Not probably. Not likely, not a preponderance. Beyond a reasonable doubt is the highest evidentiary standard in American law, and it exists specifically to protect defendants from being convicted on incomplete or misinterpreted evidence. Durk's attorneys have the right to attack every piece of the government's case, and based on what we have seen in the pretrial phase, they are going to use every tool available to them. What comes out of that courtroom will be the real story. Not the August 13th rulings, not the social media reaction, not the headlines about fainting. The verdict, when it comes, and when it does, you will hear about it right here. The culture is watching every single move inside that courtroom. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Do you think the phone evidence or the Piss Me Off video is more dangerous for the defense going into this? And what do you think happens once this case goes to the jury? Stay with us.